That's good. Awkward silence.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome one and all everybody to Cafe Gotsoul. So we have a special guest with us this afternoon. He is a fabled name in the New York public art world. Was a first generation graffiti tiger who went under the moniker Bomb One. And he was made famous for his involvement in the Simo street art project with his good friend and cohort, Jean-Michel Basquiat. He's an author, panelist in various forums, and was prominent in the documentary Boom for Real, the late teenage years of Jean-Michel Basquiat. He has a book, Simo Writings, 1978 to 2018, and then is available to order wherever fine books are sold. And you can follow him at Instagram under Albert_Diaz1.
That is correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So he's with us this late afternoon. Let's give a warm Montreal Cafe Gotsoul welcome to Albert Diaz.
Cool. Thank you.
So you're a New Yorker from the Lower East Side.
I am. That is what I am. Yeah. Well, one of among many things, but yeah, that's my ethnic background and where I was actually from. You know, the original neighborhood where I grew up was the Lower East Side.
And there's another term that it goes by
Loisaida, which is Spanglish kind of for Lower East Side. Yeah.
And invariably, when I think of the Lower East Side, I think of a very prominent spoken word artist, Miguel Pinheiro.
Yeah, Pinheiro, yeah.
Do you have any connection to him? Do you know?
I met Miguel one time. It was in a pizzeria, and I was with a friend of mine, it's Amy Flater, and she recognized him, and she goes, "Oh, aren't you Miguel Pinheiro?" He goes, "Yeah, you want to buy loose joints?" Loose joints is single marijuana cigarettes. So he was just, he was a hustler. He was a street dude, straight up street guy, who I've known people who worked with him who he would be on a movie set, and he insist on like $20,000 cash, and they would have to come and find him in a shooting gallery, which means a place where you shoot heroin, and because he would stay there for like 2 days, and they'd have to go and find him. That's the kind of guy he was. But yeah.
But it's interesting, like the Lower East Side was undergoing something what is known as white flight, and so I'd like maybe to ask you, how did Puerto Ricans kind of alter the landscape of Lower East Side? Like, what did they do to, in terms of imbuing their culture and their identity?
Well, the white flight thing is, I have to correct you there. There weren't many white folks in the Lower East Side for the longest time. I mean, back into the 1800s, it was a ethnically mixed neighborhood, a lot of Jews, Germans, and then eventually in the 50s, it started getting filled up with blacks and Puerto Ricans who came from who were immigrant, not first generation, but immigrant generation, and it filled up with, it was always a poor neighborhood, always. It was never, tenements were not built for the middle class. They were built for poor folks, for immigrants. So it's now that it's been, in the last 20 years, 20, 30 years, that it got gentrified. And it kind of, so it's actually the reverse of white flight. It's a white influx, and it has, it's changed. The neighborhood has changed hands in terms of like who owns what. There's like condos across the street from the housing project where I grew up in, where it was the kind of neighborhood where you moved out of, because it wasn't you're gonna move there. Nobody was gonna move to Avenue D. That's where I grew up. It wasn't a desirable. That's not what you would call stepping up in life. But now it's become, it's really still strange. I'm still involved in, like this week I'm supposed to be doing a installation in the projects where I grew up, and right next to one of the buildings that I lived in I lived there till I was 15, and it was during the 60s and 70s, and it was not a nice place. I mean, I witnessed my first murder when I was 5. My next door neighbor shot her husband 3 times. I went home. I was a kid. Went to my mother and said, Ma, the lady just. I didn't see it. I just ear her. I mean, but I knew it was what it was. She shot him 3 times, and then there was silence. And I told my mother what had just happened. She goes, "Oh, it's the television." And about half hour later, there was like 600 cops there. And then one of the detectives was asking me questions about, and she had to ask him to leave because he's just a kid. This is 1964, Anyway, but that was that was what that was like. So by the age of 15, after many incidents that were, like my mother was nearly raped, they finally said, we've had it. We're out of here, and they moved us to Brooklyn.
Yeah. Well, thanks for clearing that up, because when I think of the Lower East Side, I have these romantic images of the Jewish kind of experience, with the chocolate cream and the pastrami and rye.
It was a very real thing. I grew up where there was a candy store, old Jews from the old school. That was Rosie and Joe, an old couple who had a candy store where there were egg creams, vanilla and chocolate, and used to have them all for like 25 cents, And this was in my lifetime. So, but they were from a past generation,
Yeah.
But there was overlap.
Absolutely.
Well, I think it would be pretty cool, since you're one of the OGs of graffiti and tagging, maybe to give the audience kind of an overview and talk about basically the 101 of graffiti and what's involved, tag, and give a little synopsis.
So actually, I have a book that I put that me and some associates of mine put together in 2 years ago, 2022, which is the accompanying catalog to a show, which is A History of New York City Graffiti, City of Kings. I'm actually wearing the shirt right here. But it tells, it's all facts, and it's all, here it is. It's all facts, and it's a history of there's a Martha. I don't know if anybody knows who Martha Cooper is, but Martha was sweet enough to lend me this image for the back cover. There's images, there's Henry Chalfant, anybody that really made a mark in New York history culture, which is the mother of all history culture. We put it on the map. Philly was doing something different, but this New York really, any style writing that's done wherever, if it's in Toronto or if it's in Iceland, it's based on the New York thing, and that's not. I'm not just saying that to be New York centric. It's just a fact. Anyway, so this book actually discusses exactly what you're saying. But as a participant, in the very roots of graffiti, it wasn't about expressing art per se. It was more an ego-driven pissing contest. It was a competition between boys, mostly boys. Girls started early on, but it was primarily a male-oriented activity, and it was more of a sport. It was very competitive, very testosterone-driven. A lot of fighting, a lot of competition. It was primitive, absolutely primitive, and it looked primitive. It wasn't as beautiful as it has become. Like the first graffiti was much more crude, and it was about getting your name around, being more seen more, having more tags than the other guy, and then after a while, when you wanted it to look better than the other guys, and that's how the whole art thing, developed. It gradually evolved into making it look nice, but in the beginning it was very much a sport, as opposed to what it's become now. And during that period, we were inventing like the language. So, It formed a way of almost a style of dressing. One writer we call ourselves writers, and one writer could tell another writer because of the way just a certain thing. It's just like new, ink on his hands, paint. You just like he would say, "Yo, what do you write?" And that was the way we approached each other, and it was a very like a secret organization. And to a 12. The other interesting thing is that the culture was made up of kids. If you were 40 years old and you were writing graffiti, you were a cop. There was no such a thing. The average age was from 12 to 16. And when you were 16, you were starting to age out. It was like the children's crusade. It was a purely children. It was like nobody basically, there was no facial hair involved with writing graffiti, no pubic hair. It was a bunch of prepubescent kids. And that's the beauty of it, really, because it starts out as a street culture by a bunch of kids and has become a global phenomenon over like in the last 50 or so years, which is pretty fucking amazing if you ask me. So that's the gist of being a first generation graffiti writer.
Okay, so from what I understand, you were tied to a specific movement in Washington Heights, right?
Yes.
And so, how did it stand apart? What made it special?
Well, I spent a lot. I had family. A close cousin of mine was like my brother, basically, who grew up in Washington Heights, which is arguably the spawning ground for. I mean, if you watch all these movies like Beat Street or whatever, which is appropriating a street culture, everything happens in the South Bronx. It's like Beat Boy. Everything that was ever born of that culture seems to just all one day sprouted out from the South Bronx. Everything, just people start breakdancing. It didn't happen that way. All boroughs contributed to everything. But with the graffiti thing, the first place, and people like Phase 2 have been quoted from that. Phase 2 is like one of the big granddaddies of graph culture and hip hop poster making and all that stuff. So he had his hands in a bunch of different aspects of New York City street culture. It's that whole hip hop 5 elements thing is. A lot of us graffiti artists are like, that's oversimplification. They try to pigeonhole things so that people can grasp it easily, so they call the whole thing, it's all hip hop. The fact is that graffiti started, we were listening to whatever, I mean, it was way before hip hop was even a thought or a concept. It just didn't exist. I mean, you had white boys from Queens who were listening to death metal, riding on trains, as well as people listening to Kool and the Gang or some other funk which was the music of the time. So that's a bit of a confused history. But I'm getting off the point here. Where were we? We were
the Washington Heights.
The Washington Heights thing. So yeah, Washington Heights was very important. That's where it first became a visible thing. You notice all these kids were writing their names, and it was all focused in Washington Heights, as opposed to this thing at the South Bronx, which, not to take anything away from the South Bronx, but that's where we first saw it. And it's right across the bridge from the Bronx. You could walk from Washington Heights to the Bronx, passing the river, which is like probably a 10-minute walk. So of course it's going to spread. That's how things spread, right? Back then we didn't have an internet. What we had was a New York City subway system. So if a guy writes something, a guy from 207th Street, which is North Manhattan, Dyckman, Inwood / Washington Heights, writes on a train, that A train goes all the way to Queens, to Far Rockaway, which is near the Kennedy Airport. That's a long distance. So all that information is being spread through, and meanwhile you have Bed-Stuy and Brownsville and all the other neighborhoods, and that name, some kid in Brownsville sees that and says, oh shit, I want to do that too. And that's how it spreads, just someone sees it and it's kids, and I want to do that too. And that was the secret, that was the attraction, was I want to be part of this secret society, and then you start out, everybody starts out as a toy. What we call a toy was just like insignificant, right? but it became kind of an addiction, and you like start to get more and more, and you meet other guys that are doing it, and it's, you know, and it's totally illicit. You know, there was nothing. It's not like your mother was okay with it. You know, you used to get your ass whipped for doing that shit. I got my face knocked in a few times by truck drivers for marking up their trucks. Yeah. Oh no, there's a couple of, you know, there's stories of kids that died painting in the train yards, or where, you know, there's 600 volts of DC power coming out of the third rail. That'll melt your eyeballs. You know what I'm saying? It was a very dangerous thing, and that was part of the attraction, was the thrill of doing some crazy shit. You know, it's anyway. But Washington. Getting back to Washington Heights. Washington Heights was really a significant place, you know, for the birth of that culture, and those trains that go there, the A and the 1. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, at that time in New York City, it was almost falling to pieces. Remember that New York Daily News headline, "Veto to New York drop dead." So is that what fed the energy for the graffiti movement in New York?
It definitely painted an environment that was like, nobody cares about this place. We don't care about this place. It's like it had fallen. I mean, New York looked like a demolition job. It was really other than like places like, you know, nice neighborhoods that weren't affected. Like Fifth Avenue was still Fifth Avenue, but all the neighborhoods were really affected. The economy was you know, basically close to bankruptcy. It's funny now. You walk down the Bowery now, and there's like a Shepherd Ferry, you know, murals and stuff like that. There was a time when it was just painted with bodies, you know, like vagrants, like it was Skid Row, but like the worst Skid Row you've ever seen. I mean, it was frightening, you know. People pile on top of each other. It was apocalyptic. You know, the place smelled like urine. And now there's like these $1 million lofts there, you know, and multi-million dollar. The turnaround is like monumental. It's insane. You know, but the city was really run ragged, truly ragged. Yeah.
Definitely, as a kid, I remember that going to Brooklyn, and practically my second childhood was in East New York. So from, it's, you know, basically when you were like Bomb 1.
Yeah, Bomb
right?
1. Right.
You know, it ran its course for you. Like, what was you know, like, talk about that period, and how did it for you kind of end for you?
So I mean, you got to figure. I did that, and I you know, I like all graffiti artists, you know. We started out on the street, and then, you know, you met other graffiti artists. You got better at it. You got obsessed about it. I ended up going to around that time. I just finished 8th grade. You know, I graduated Catholic school 8th grade, and went to a vocational high school. So I was from 9th to 11th grade. I was in the High School of Art and Design, which was a premier graffiti artist school. Because if you could draw, you were even that better a graffiti artist. And people like Tracy 168, SJK 171, Flint, a lot of real, I don't know if you guys know who any of these people are, but these are all like major players. And Pistol, who was responsible for the first 3D piece. I mean, all these guys were, Earl, Shots, just a bunch of guys who were members of the United Graffiti Artists, which is the first organized group of graffiti artists, went to art and design. So it was like a mecca, you know, like a place to be, and we get visitors from after school, of course, kids from other schools that wanted us to sign their black books. Well, I think the black book concept probably came out of art and design, because we were the ones with the black books, you know, which were drawing pads. So it was a very special place. But during that time, I also, you know, I mean, I started flunking out in school because I wasn't going to school, because I was just going there to meet my buddies to go spray paint trains. And, you know, there was a bunch of places that during the day, during the off hours, you could go and paint trains. You know, where they lay them up, they park them during the day because there's no more rush hour. So we did that, and it just it progressed for the next. I started when I was 12 till I was 17, still really active. That's 5 years of your life, and you're under 20. So it's basically one. What was that? Is that me? Anyway, 1/3 of your life. 1/3 of your life that you've been doing that. So guess what? That's who you are. You've been doing that for 1/3 of your life, and it's you identify as that. And then, in the interim of that time, what's happened is there's a lot of people doing graffiti now. It's become pedestrian.
Oversaturated.
You know, it's oversaturated. Everybody and their French bulldog is writing graffiti. So it becomes played out. Remember, the charm was that we were part of a secret order, right? And that's worn off. And you're interested in other stuff. You want to chase girls, you want to smoke weed, and you want to do whatever you want to do. But it's not as exciting as it used to be. And so by that time, I was asked to leave art and design. They referred me to another school, which was City as a school, which was an experimental alternative high school, and that's where I met Basquiat. And by the time I got there, I was kind of bored with graffiti, and I'm onto a new chapter in my life. I'm at a new school. Graffiti has got me kicked out of school, so I'm starting to reconsider all this stuff. I want to get out of high school. I ended up going to high school for 5 years as opposed to 4 years. So already you feel like a loser, right? And it's like, oh, dude, I got to finish this. So I got a little less involved with graffiti, and I left a lot of my friends behind, etc., etc. And that's how that panned out. And then I meet Jean-Michel Basquiat in '76. That's a long time ago. And we hit it off as friends. He's half Puerto Rican. There were very few Puerto Rican kids in this. It was a hippie school, you know,
Yeah.
and there was not. There's a lot of Latinos weren't really down with that kind of lifestyle and didn't go to school. There was a few of us, but it wasn't. It wasn't like the common. You don't look at a Puerto Rican kid and say, "Oh, there's a hippie kid." Anyway, so I guess I would describe myself more than like some kid dancing salsa and stuff like that. So that's where and so was Basquiat. He wasn't particularly any one. He didn't have this a style. He didn't fit into a type, you know. And we became friends, and the whole same old thing evolved because we used to use the expression same old to describe particularly a friend of ours who was this girl who just actually passed away recently. Elizabeth La Madrid. Anyway, we all met in school, and we used to hang out. And this story has gotten so twisted and convoluted, but we thought it was cool. She invited us to go to her parents' house, which was a loft in Tribeca, and there were very few people living in lofts in Tribeca back then. My girlfriend Kate was also what we call art brats that grew up in that whole. Before it was exploited, before Tribeca was like Robert De Niro place, it was so we would go. She says, "Let's come to my and smoke weed with my folks," and we thought that was really charming and novel. We're like, oh shit, we're gonna go hang out with her parents. But like after like the third or fourth time of doing this, we call it Titi. It was like Groundhog Day. We knew exactly what Dad was going to. Her stepfather, turned out he was a well-known Fluxus artist. His name's Juan Downey. He's like in museums in Spain and stuff like that. Anyway, so we started joking about doing the same old. That's how going. Yeah, that's how it. But that's also how it was associated with smoking weed, because like it's been abbreviated. The whole we were smoking. It didn't happen that. It was everything's over. Anything you read is oversimplified. It didn't happen that way. Whatever you read, any history, it's all bullshit. Right? Anyway, so that we started just playing with that. You know, I mean, kids smoke. Either we're tripping on LSD or we're smoking weed, but our brains are working overtime, and we're two artists, kids, right? And we just want, you know, two minds working together, and we decided that it would be cool to create this thing that could like change your life, to create like a cult or a drug or a religion, and it didn't really exist, but that could change your life. And Jean-Michel called it the SAMO, which was a word that we were using. It doesn't, when it comes to the graffiti, it doesn't actually mean it stand for. People say it stands for SAMO shit. It doesn't really stand for anything. It's just this religion that we, anyway. So that got skewed too in the history books. It's like anyway, but so me being a graffiti, Jean was not a member of graffiti culture. He was not one of us. We are us. Like, I mean, guys who spent a third of their life involved in graffiti as a child and coming up through the ranks. He didn't do that because he grew up a little more sheltered, and he wasn't part of that world. He wasn't, you know, he just wasn't part of that world. But I suggested that we start a campaign, like, to spread this word about SAMO and see what we could do with it. And without even realizing what we were doing, we were like experimenting with hype. We were doing like the madman thing, you know, like let's go out and sell a product that doesn't fucking exist. And we started in January of 1978 with the school newspaper. That's where we first started. You know, he wrote this really great story. He was a good writer. Jean was had he not been a painter, he would have been a great writer. And it was really funny. It's about this guy who's looking for a religion, and he goes to a kiosk where they sell religion, and the sale, and it's like the 2-for-1 Buddhist sale, you know. And the special of the day was SAMO, this religion, and for us reading it, the kids that, you know, that we were all hanging out together, we thought it was really funny because we had been using that word, but it no longer meant same old shit anymore. Right? Anyway. So we started doing it. We made these flyers that were actually, was part of the newspaper, was a flyer with like six or seven cartoon character faces that were like, what is it? As testimonials, like people who had tried SAMO and changed their lives. So it was pretty funny, right? And we used to start handing out these like copies of it on the street to people, like try SAMO, it'll change your life. So within weeks we started writing, doing an actual graffiti campaign of SAMO. Like I remember one of the first ones was on a church on West Broadway that's not now the Soho Grand Hotel. Before the Soho Grand Hotel was there was a church, and they had lost their entire what do you call it? The parochial, what do they call it? All the people that go to that church, the congregation. They had lost the entire congregation, and Jesus, I'm stuck on the word. The Catholic organization had sold the archdiocese had sold the property, and you know, they had to close the church down. So we wrote SAMO as an alternative to God on the church. Well, it was actually like abandoned, right, shut down. That was one of the first ones. Anyway, so we started. I had a girlfriend who lived in Tribeca, like my girlfriend Kate. So we spent a lot of time in Tribeca, walking through Soho, which is right next to Soho. So that's where we were, and at that time we were being exposed to the art world very young. Like Jean was like 16, 17, and I was 18, 19. I was always a year and a half older than him. And he became really thirsty for like wanting to be part of it, you know, like something. We were pissed off at all these adults. It was boring and it was weird, you know, especially for kids. But we had all this commentary to say about, you know, about the lifestyle, and that's what inspired us, you know.
Well, thanks a lot for connecting some serious dots, man. Like for real. It's interesting because during that time, you know, downtown New York was kind of like a no man's land. Wasn't very safe, particularly safe. you'd go to the Mud Club, Club 57, and you basically didn't know exactly where you're going to sleep that night. And then there was the East Village Eye, and there was the TV party, all these entities and all this energy. So how did it play into what you and Jean were doing?
Well, I mean, we were at the Mud Club together. Like, we used to go there while it was still free. And then at some point, I guess in 1979, they started charging at the door. We used to break in from the back door. We did. We snapped the lock. It was a chain. We had to use these cheap little chains and break it every time. And then around 79, it's like what me and Jean had. This is what I left out. We started writing the graffiti in January of '78, and by '79, we had gotten an article in the Soho, not in Soho Weekly News, in the Village Voice. So to a couple of teenagers, we have arrived. This is like, whoa, wow, and I felt as if we had accomplished what we were set out to do, which was to create this thing, get people to believe that it existed, and we did it. And Jean was very much a careerist at a very early age, and wanted to keep it going. And I'm like, well, we just got outed, we just like, our anonymity has been busted, so there's no point in continuing this thing. Let's do something, you do something. Anyway, but we were heading in two different directions. I wanted to play music. I was like learning percussions and stuff like that. And he was very serious about becoming an artist. So his first show, there was the first 3 shows he did in lesser, one of them was actually in Italy, but they were under the name of Samo, because Samo had acquired some sort of local fame, and it was a good strategic thing for him. Even though, and he never denied it was 2 people. I mean, he's on video on a few different interviews saying it was me and Al Diaz. But he used it as because it had some presence, he used it as a launch pad, a springboard, if you will, for his career. But after a while, he let it go. I mean, it's funny when I see a lot of fake Basquiat, like a lot, and anytime that you see a Samo on a Basquiat, it's fake, because when he started doing that, he wasn't doing. There's only 1 or 2 that especially one that he made for me that said Samo está en algo, which belonged to Francesco Polizzi, who it was given to me. I don't know if anybody saw Radiant Child, but I talk about it in Radiant Child. I say I sold the painting. I didn't sell it for drugs. I sold it for sound equipment, and I sold it for $3,500. Now it's insured for $21 million, but that's not what I regret. I don't regret that. I regret that he made it just for me, and I didn't appreciate it, because he made it specifically for me. And I was like, fuck. At that point, I was just burnt out with him, right? Me and everybody else, because what happens is, people that become super famous forget about all the, I mean, a lot, not everybody, but, people become a little narcissistic and they just forget about everybody. And he did that in a sense to a lot of his old friends. And it's like, oh, I'll get another one, Anyway, whatever. But I forgot what I was talking about. What the point was. But
that period,
the whole TV party.
Yeah.
The only time that he became friends with Glenn O'Brien, and he was still hanging out. And there was a point where I stopped going to the Mud Club, because it just, once again, it started getting too like trendy, and I was like, I wasn't that kind of like trendster, I was like, this is getting icky now. It's got like too many out of people I don't know, people touchy-feely, people from out of town that I don't really want to hang out with. Remember, I grew up in a housing project. I'm from the hood, and there was this kind of like flavor that was kind of, like sophisticated, bougie kind of, but not like. And I'm from, I'm like, I don't want to hang around that. It's not. It felt unauthentic to me. But Jean-Michel was a social climber, and he could roll with that, He came from a very middle class background. His father was Haitian, aristocracy. I mean, he used to brag about how his grandmother was the Haitian Diane von Furstenberg. I was like, damn, dude. But he was not a poor kid, you know. And my parents came from Puerto Rico with cardboard suitcases, you know. My grandfather used to cut sugar cane. I'd bring him his lunch and the fucking sugar cane fizz. So it was you know what? I mean, that whole working class mentality, it's a real thing, you know. When you grow up in the housing project, and it's something some of us have to get over because it sort of holds us back, in a sense, because you think you don't deserve and all that shit. It's all that fucked up mental shit that happens when you grow up as an underprivileged person or whatever. Anyway, but it's a real thing.
Because, you talked about your music, and so also during that period, that downtown boho scene was co-opting uptown hip-hop culture into the mix through, Fat Fight Freddy and various other entities. And you were involved in a Basquiat infamous project, Beat Bop with Ramalzi and K-Rob. Can you give us a rundown of that?
Yeah, that was a cool project. Jean-Michel had like this competitive thing with Ramalzi. Ramalzi didn't really buy it, you know. He was he was always like basically calling him a phony, you know. And I guess at some point Jean wanted to prove that he could like pay to produce his record and stuff. It was almost like, once again, it was just like, I could put money out. So he did it with that spirit. And of course, Ramel jumped on it, and he called me to play the percussion. Jean-Michel called me, and I was like, hell yeah, I'll do this. It was a paid gig, so I didn't get royalties because I got a flat. All of us got, all the musicians played on it got flat out rates. He sold the rights immediately after, like he got bored with that project like 3 weeks after he printed all the records. But it was we spent one night at Sound Factory. I forgot what the name of the studio was. I think it was on 34th Street downstairs, and we spent all night. It was blowing coke and drinking it was insane. It was insane. What's his name? K-Rob. K-Rob was a little kid. He was like really young. He had this baby face. And then the rest of it, Toxic was there. And we had a blast. It was fun, and Jean-Michel was very much hands-on. He was like, no, I don't like that. He wanted to program the beatbox, the claps and stuff like that. Of course, the guy who played the instruments, the real ringer musician for the session was this guy Sekou Bunch, who played. I don't know if anybody knows. What is it? Tom Brown, Funkin' from Jamaica. Yeah, he was the bass player. And Jean was like, oh, I love this guy. He's the bass player from Funkin' from Jamaica. He kept going on and on about that. I was like, that's a fucking good bass line. So he played that, and he played the skank, the guitar, and then I was doing like a call and response. Dum dum dum, dum dum dum. Anyway, that kind of and a call and response, and we had a good time, and these guys, I think K-Rob was getting pissed off because Ramel wouldn't shut up. He was just rapping over him. So it was kind of like this. It was actually, it was a little discomfort there.
Yeah, it's one of the most expensive 12-inch singles you can ever find on the original label. It's cost, I think I've seen one for like $1,000.
1,000, 25,000 for a sealed one.
1,000, yeah.
It's insane. It's
insane.
Crazy.
Yeah. Okay, so what happened? There was a time where you weren't as much as in the art. You were in construction and carpentry. So what was that period like?
Well, it was a dark period. I mean, I was working as a carpenter since the late 70s. But in the 90s, I got strung out. I ended up, I was a heroin addict for 19 years. So my life, I was still creating art, but I wasn't involved in a career because I was in underground, but I had some really rough times. But I somehow, you know, I survived. Yeah, I'm here.
So, okay, so now we're going to talk about that in this new period, what I would call the wet paint type of phase of your life now. It's kind of like what you've been doing, kind of like what you're doing now, and I know you've done some stuff with the New York City Transit Association with signage and anagrams. And so maybe you can give us a rundown, like to summarize what is wet paint.
Well, the MTA, I don't work with the MTA, but I work with their signage, yeah, with their elements. I use the materials that they discard. The wet paint signs are literally that. There are signs that are put up whenever they paint. I forgot how many train stations they have in the system, but they're quite. It's more than 4 lines. It's quite a few stations, so there's constantly maintenance. And the placards that they use, are little thick cards, read wet paint in this Franklin Gothic text that's really, really bold and handsome, and that well-made cards. It's like union-made printing kind of really quality stuff. So I was noticing these things just constantly being thrown out. I'm like, you know what? That's a shame. I could use those for something. They're just nice looking. It's a nice product, right? So I started collecting them. At this point, I have hundreds and hundreds of boxes of them. I do. I just take them off. You can take them off the cop in front of a cop. You know, like, excuse me, like, and they're like whatever, because they end up in the garbage. So, so I utilize those, and I utilize the symbols from the wayfinding system, or the letters of the trains, the numbers of the trains, and that's my alphabet. And it's a constrained alphabet, but I use there's a U that has an arrow on it. That means turn around. And then there's the no entry sign. That's a red dot with a white slash through it, which I use as an O. So, and yeah, and I could. It's not just the anagrams. I can talk about shit. Like I could have a whole narrative about, you know, like I talk about that, like a circle being the most perfect form and all that, all kinds of shit, you know. And it's over the last 14 years that I have developed this language thing because once again, what I ended up doing with Basquiat was, to break it down with the same old, was a language-oriented graffiti, and that's what has been quoted as in history, as a language-oriented graffiti that's more conceptual, and that's what I've been doing with the letters is language-oriented text art. That's about messages, incorporated with imagery too, to make it more exciting, because the signs themselves aren't, for me, it's not enough. You know, I use that as kind of like journal. To, you know, I post a lot of those signs, but it's not really a piece per se. And so in some cases, it speaks to people. Some people like ask me to buy the original sign and stuff like that. But so it's language art. You know, it's text art, and it's and by itself, because of the different symbols and the way it looks. I think we have an example of it somewhere, but it's pretty. It's nice to look at.
Would you also say that it's also having a conversation with whoever receives it? Is there some kind of dialogue or any kind of message you're trying to convey through this medium?
Well, the idea, of any message when you're trying to there's definitely trying to have speak to people. It's not just for me. I'm trying to make it so that it reaches people, so that people, we talk about stuff that all of us feel, because we're all humans, right? Everyone, gets cold, everyone feels warmth, everyone feels or wants to feel love. It's, stuff that's just common, real basic stuff. And that's what I shoot for, is, and sometimes I really nail it, which is what we went. When somebody told me about artists, is that we kind of want people to get it. That's when you nail it in doing whatever kind of art you do, is when people get it. Because that's what we shoot for.
Right.
So maybe you can give us a rundown of what you got going on now and what's been happening lately.
Well, the last few years I've been doing a lot of art, a lot of exhibitions, shows. Where I do mixed media pieces. I have two examples here. Actually, in those examples, of my mixed media art is the messages that are from the subway alphabet, and so they're perfect actually to explain what I do. I do what I would describe as urban landscapes and in this case some of these are a touch on memories. Like I said, I turned 65 this year. So what happens is you start reflecting on when you were young, which is kind of cool, right? No, actually, it's not cool. Nobody wants to get old. Anyway, but no. So yeah, and and just talking about stuff that everybody could relate to, because that's what that's what I'm here for. That's my job at this point.
Okay, I think he's pretty much covered everything, and I'd like to thank him again, Mr. Albert Diaz.
Thank you.
So check out his book wherever you can go to chapters. Try to order it. It's
the book we have here is City of Kings: A History of New York City Graffiti, and it's published by us and I read books. And it's 40 Canadian, yeah, 40 Canadian, and it's really if you really want a good source of information, this is a book that is being there's a teacher's edition being because my partner Mariah Hausman is teaching a course from this book, so it's a very legitimate piece of information. It's not bullshit, it's not opinions, and it's got some really good writing in it.
Thanks a lot, brother.
Thank you very much.